Crota's End. You want to get it done, so let's get into it. If you are looking for a fire team, other people to run this with, please join my Discord. The link is right in the description. Okay, I'll start off this guide by first covering the main Enlighten mechanic that this entire raid has. Don't skip this part because I won't be going over it in detail again. Reason being is that this Enlighten mechanic does not change for the entirety of the raid, so I'll just save you a lot of time by not having to cover it for every single encounter. This whole mechanic is essentially hot potato with a bunch of rules. Picking up the Chalice of Light, or this glowing white orb, will start filling up the Chalice of Light buff bar on the screen of the person who is holding it. Let's say it's you in this example. Once that bar is full, you will become engulfed with light, which is a 10-second timer that will kill you if it reaches 0. This means that someone else is going to have to pick up the chalice from you so you don't die. Once someone does take it from you, you'll become enlightened, which does not have a timer on it, thankfully. You'll be able to use this and get rid of the enlightened buff to accomplish different things within this raid, and it's a bit different for each encounter, so we'll just cover those in a little bit more detail during those specific sections. But being enlightened will also prevent you from taking back the chalice. So you can't have the same two players just swapping back and forth the entire time. That's not going to work. The whole team is going to need to know how to do this. Once a player uses the enlightened buff, which again we'll cover in different scenarios in which you'll do that later, that player will get the drained of light debuff, which is essentially the cooldown for picking up the chalice again. So you use your enlightened, now you're drained with light, you cannot pick up the chalice until that timer runs out. Next thing to note here is that you will not get the enlightened buff if someone takes the chalice from you before the Chalice of Light buff is filled. Taking it too early won't do anything for you other than waste precious time, since most of Crota's End is time-based. So to get enlightened successfully, someone has to take the chalice from you during that sweet spot while you are engulfed with light. This means that it's best to have a set order for who takes the chalice from who, and timer callouts are vital for making sure the next player can get to you in time. My team likes to call out when the chalice is 3/4 progressed. We just say 3/4. So the next player can easily get there to take it when needed. The final main mechanic is the preserve action that you can do. Preserving items in this raid is basically setting down the item and not having to worry about it for a little bit. It lets you take just a second to collect yourselves, but it is also a necessary part to the raid for different reasons, which again we'll cover later. But in every scenario, the preserve area will always be on a pedestal that looks kind of like this. All right, let's get into the raid itself. The opening surface area of the moon is not an encounter because it takes literally 2 seconds. All you have to do is have someone grab the chalice, get enlightened by having someone else take that chalice, and then enlighten the plate to build the bridge while everyone is standing on it. It's that easy. But before crossing the bridge to progress to the next encounter, let's go over the red border puzzle really quickly. Completing this puzzle is super easy, and it will guarantee you a red border Crota's End weapon once you defeat Crota at the very end. This is available once per week, per account, so you cannot do this on all 3 characters, just an FYI. So look for the 3 pairs of statues surrounding the Hellmouth. This is pair 1, this is pair 2, and this is pair 3. All you're doing here is checking which statue out of each pair is glowing. You can see in this instance, the first pair of statues showed right, the second pair showed left, and the third pair showed right. So the correct call out here would be right, left, right. It is random for every raid instance, so just make sure to write down the order in the chat, in the Discord, piece of paper, whatever. These glowing statues are basically telling us which other statues throughout the raid we have to activate in order to successfully complete this red border puzzle. Once you've taken note of these, go ahead and cross the bridge and fall down the massive hole to where you will end up in the Abyss, which is actually the name of the encounter. What I'd recommend doing now is actually not worry about the encounter at all and go find the first secret chest. Finding this is as easy as hugging the left wall and checking these doorways for an open door that will contain this secret chest. Don't worry, the chest does not despawn, so you can try as many times as you want to make sure everyone gets it. Eager edge swords and strand grappling obviously makes this very easy, but it's not necessary. All right, on to the encounter. The layout of this area is, I believe, identical to Destiny 1's Crota's End, but now there are swinging lamps that will completely ruin your day if you don't avoid them. That, and of course now you've got to play hot potato with juggling the chalice around, while also avoiding the Curse of Darkness death timer. If that timer reaches 0, everyone on your team dies. And if this wasn't enough, you will also be plagued with the Weight of Darkness stacking debuff, which is the exact same as the Lightblade Strike Lamp section, or the same as Destiny 1's Crota's End. the more stacks of Weight of Darkness you have, the slower you move to where eventually you just can't even sprint at all. You can get rid of the Weight of Darkness, but let's just start the encounter first. To start the encounter, someone obviously must grab the chalice and start heading towards this first lamp ahead of you. Once that player's chalice bar is full, have the next player take it to get the original chalice holder enlightened. Being enlightened in this opening encounter will allow you to activate the lamps along the path that you need to take. Activating these lamps is what is going to reduce your Weight of Darkness stacks, which allow you to move more normally. But you can't hang around these lamps too long though. Just like in Destiny 1, once they start turning orange, that means they are about to blow up and they will instantly kill you. They've got a huge blast radius too, so make sure to leave a little bit earlier than you think, just to be safe. So you can see the importance of sticking together as a team here. If someone gets left behind, it is incredibly difficult to go back and grab them, and you don't want to activate these lamps too early, and you don't want to blow it up before someone that's lagging behind is able to get there. But you also have to fight the Curse of Darkness debuff timer, so you can't take too long. So yeah, there's a lot going on here. All of this just requires good timing and good communication. You're going to be just fine. The other thing you'll notice here is that occasionally you'll see this small pedestal very close to certain lamps. Make sure the chalice holder deposits here. This is that preserving mechanic I was talking about a little bit earlier. That's what we're doing here. Preserving the chalice will not only completely refresh the Curse of Darkness wipe timer, but it will also allow the next 2 to 3 lamps to be lit up. So if you don't preserve the chalice, you're not going to be able to light up the next few lamps. Another thing to note here is that unfortunately these preserve areas are not in set locations. They're going to change every single run, so just make sure everyone on your team is looking out for them. And yes, you can speedrun this by skipping a few lamps. You can use strand grapple if you want, but I would recommend only doing that if your team has done this before. Even if 5 of you can speedrun it totally fine, it only takes one person that doesn't really know what they're doing to completely ruin the run, and you'll have to wipe, and it just wastes a bunch of time. Slow and steady will win the race, so if it's your first time running through it, just take it lamp by lamp. It's completely fine to do that. So you'll continue this method of fighting your way past lamps and enemies while still juggling the chalice, and eventually you will reach the very end with this plate where you'll need to form another bridge that will lead you out of the encounter. Just have any enlightened players accelerate the bridge formation by dunking on the plate. It should take just 2 to 3 players doing this, and keep passing around the chalice just like normal. And you can also preserve the chalice here if you're running out of time, which you probably will. The whole team should be just standing on the plate and helping form the bridge behind you. Eventually, ogres will spawn in, and unstoppable ogres too, so make sure that you are ready for those. A Well of Radiance Warlock is always welcome while holding this plate. Eventually, the bridge will form to where you'll need to cross and avoid even more swinging lamps. Thankfully, only one player has to reach the finish line to successfully complete the encounter for everybody. Just know that you've got one more ogre waiting for you once these doors open. Then you kind of just have to run to the light, run to the end of the hallway, and you will be done with this encounter. Once you make it to this next area, it's time to activate the first red border puzzle statue. If your first statue callout is left, go ahead and head this way and activate this one. If it was right, go to the opposite side of this room and activate this statue. And that's it. Time to move on to the cross the bridge encounter. There is no boss here, but we still have quite a lot to manage to complete it. Our goal is to construct the bridge, kill some beefy swordbearer knights, collect their swords, and bring them and the whole team over to the other side, where we will need to use these swords to kill the giant gatekeeper knights. And that's it. Let's go over how to do it. Just like last encounter, have someone grab the chalice to start the encounter. All 6 of you will be on the opening side, so it's a bit easier to clear out enemies because you're all together, but keep in mind you'll need to juggle the chalice just like the last encounter, so make sure your team is on it by calling out how much time they've got left on their chalice charging. To make matters more difficult, players must stand on the left and right plates to avoid the Annihilator Totem team wipe mechanic. If a player runs off their plate for longer than about 7 seconds, it's going to be a wipe for the whole team. So make sure there is at least one player standing on and guarding each plate. There are lots of enemies and barrier champions, and eventually wizards spawn in, and they will endlessly spawn in, so make sure whoever's on plate duty has good ad clear weapons and they can just handle everything. Because everyone has to kind of shift around, there's going to be a time that whoever is on plate duty, they've got to grab the chalice and they have to swap with someone else who is not holding the chalice. Communication is key here. Just make sure there are people always on plates and you're going to be just fine. Go ahead and get 2 players enlightened and have them deposit their enlightened buff on the middle plate. This will really speed up the bridge building, and it's going to allow those guardians holding swords to cross to the other side more quickly. You'll see a sword bearer pop out. He can pop out at different places, but he's going to run towards you all. This will happen while everyone's getting enlightened, but you don't need to worry about him immediately. My recommendation is once the second player has been enlightened and they've deposited on the platform, and the third person is now holding the chalice, you will then be safe to start taking out the sword bearer. The timing works out pretty well if you do that. Killing that sword bearer knight will obviously drop a sword, but keep in mind the sword will actually despawn after about 12 seconds. And not everyone can pick up a sword, only enlightened players are cool enough to do so. So timing out and making sure that someone is enlightened before killing the sword bearer is the best way to do it. So once the bridge is built, you'll want to get 5 players enlightened, since we will need to carry over 5 swords to the other side to deal with those gatekeeper knights. Alright, so the bridge is built. Why isn't everyone just going over right now? Well, only guardians wielding a sword or holding the chalice are deemed worthy enough to cross the bridge, so if you try to cross without these, you will just die instantly. So what we'll do is have the first sword wielding guardian cross the bridge, with the only remaining non-enlightened guardian who is holding the chalice. I know it's a lot. The chalice holder can then preserve the chalice on the other side, right here, and they can help clear ads while the sword bearer starts working on the gatekeeper knight, that big blue one. Once the sword wielding guardian has killed the gatekeeper, they then need to preserve their sword on one of the pedestals. So just go to one of these pedestals, doesn't matter which one, and preserve the sword. We're gonna need this a little bit later. While this is happening, players on the original side should be killing the next swordbearer knights that spawn in. Since everyone is now enlightened on the original side, anyone can pick up a sword and cross the bridge, it doesn't really matter. Keep in mind though that until 3 players have crossed the bridge, the original side has to keep holding down those left, middle, and right plates to keep the bridge constructed and prevent the annihilator totems from wiping the team. That's extremely important. Once 3 players have crossed to the other side, the responsibility now transfers to the crossed bridge players, where they can then keep the bridge constructed. So people on the original side can now kind of hop off plates and go kill things as they want. It sounds a bit confusing, but I promise you it's easy once you see how it works for yourself. Anyone left over on the original side should now obviously be grabbing swords and crossing the bridge. And as each sword wielding guardian crosses the bridge, a new gatekeeper is going to spawn in. So just make sure as a team you're kind of coordinating, helping out that guardian trying to kill that gatekeeper. And again, once that sword wielding guardian gets the gatekeeper kill, they can also go ahead and preserve their sword at one of the pedestals. Once everyone has crossed, you will get a massive wave of enemies that will spawn in, and at this point, everyone is free to jump off their plates. There's no need for a bridge anymore, so no need to hold the plates. But what you should be doing is getting some players enlightened again. 2 to 3 players is completely fine, but the more the merrier. And I'll mention why in just a second, but barrier champions will spawn in again, so be ready for them. Eventually ogres will also spawn in, and that's when you know you're getting close to the very end. Once the ogres are dealt with, 5 gatekeepers will spawn out of the doors in the middle area. Now it's time for any enlightened players to grab those preserved swords and go to town on all the gatekeepers. Any hunter that's using tether is very helpful here, since it keeps all these gatekeepers kind of huddled together and weakened, makes them a little bit easier to kill. But that's it for this one. Once you kill the last gatekeeper, you have completed the encounter. Before moving through the now open gate, it's time to activate the second statue for the red border puzzle. If the second statue you're supposed to get was on the left side, go ahead and go this way. If it was on the right side, go ahead and go this way. So as far as I know, this is the only disappearing secret chest in all of Destiny. So if you are not fast enough, you straight up will not get access to this chest. So make sure you've planned ahead here. If you know you're just taking too long, you can actually wipe during this encounter and try again. But if you get all the way to the end and the door closes, then you're just out of luck. So what you'll do here is have someone grab the chalice and make sure to let that player get kills while holding the chalice, because it actually will charge that chalice faster when getting kills. Once the chalice meter is full, obviously have someone grab it, so the original player will become enlightened. That enlightened player can now go through the green force field and should nuke that shrieker that's trying to shoot at you. Doing this will open up that room for everyone else to where you'll need to do the same thing again one more time. So have another player get enlightened, go through the force field, kill the shrieker, and make sure to have a third person in line ready to go to grab the chalice again. The third player holding the chalice should run to the preserve area, preserve it real quick, and have someone else eager edge, do whatever you want, grapple, all the way to that door at the end. It's going to be closing. It's going to try and boot you out. Just make sure you get at least one person through that door so it unlocks it for everybody. And that is Secret Chest 2, the hardest secret chest to get in all of Destiny. Alright, so now it is time for the first actual boss of this raid, Iryut the Deathsinger. This is actually a very quick fight as long as you can get the hang of it. The goal here is to find out which of the 7 total rooms contain wizards that you'll need to send enlightened players to go kill, ultimately allowing the team to break Iryut's shield and damage her. Here's how we do all that. To start, split up into 2 teams of 3, have 3 go right, 3 go left. You'll need to kill all the big knights in the area. There are some in the middle, some in the upper section. You'll get the hang of it. They kind of hang around in the same positions. But once everything is killed, Shriekers will actually spawn in on the left and right sides outside of that middle room area up those stairs. Killing the Shriekers will open up that force field, which will allow you to really start the fight, and will also give you access to a new chalice, which your designated first player should immediately pick up. This is where the fight actually begins. So as for team roles, make sure to have one player be the designated scout. A Void Hunter able to use True Sight is the best. It's way easier if you just do this. A Wish Ender player is second best. It works okay. And if you don't have either, it's going to be really annoying. You can still do it. It's just going to take a lot more thought and you have a higher potential of messing up. So what is the scout looking for? Well, as mentioned, there are 7 rooms that are going to be guarded by these green hive force fields in the area, all of which cannot be accessed unless a player is enlightened, which by now you should definitely know how to get enlightened. I'm not going to go over that again. As for callouts, use this amazing map created by the one and only Priony. I use Priony's maps in all of my guides, so I always like to give them a shout out. But feel free to use whatever callouts you want, as long as you know what each room is called. That's all that matters. The scout's only job when not doing boss damage is to just be the scout. So don't worry too much about the ads, because the rest of the team, they'll be able to handle them, I promise. Void Hunters, Wish Ender users, you should be able to peek around the area to see what kind of enemy is in which room. If you can see an outline of a Shrieker in the room, you know that is the wrong room. Do not go in there. If it's a wizard, you know it is the right room. And if you're not a hunter or a Wish Ender user, you have to use your radar. The only problem is that you'll have to pay attention to the up and down arrows on the tower areas where there's 2 on top of each other. Full disclosure, I have not even done a run looking at my radar yet, so I'm not a pro at explaining this part. My recommendation, just be a hunter, be a Wish Ender user. It's going to save you a lot of headache. Also, it is best to call out each room as the scout finds them, so enlightened players can just go right there when they're called. There's no reason to wait to call them out. So that is a scout role. It's actually very easy. What about everybody else? Long story short, you're going to want to have everyone else become enlightened, including the scout, usually during the damage phase. For the first damage phase, designate 3 players that will be going to the rooms that the scout is calling out. These players can go to the room again immediately after the scout calls out that room, but they will want to wait on killing that wizard, as killing a wizard in these rooms will initiate the Dark Liturgy damage window timer, whether you're ready for it or not. You will obviously want to have as big of a damage window as possible so you can do the most damage, so it is highly recommended that you do a 3, 2, 1 countdown to have each player kill the wizards as close to the same time as possible. It doesn't have to be exactly the same time. Killing all the wizards will remove Iryut's shield and open her up for damage, so just make sure that everyone is ready to go. Big thing to know here, super important, is that each damage phase will add 1 more wizard room, which means 1 more room the scout was going to have to find and 1 more enlightened player that's going to have to go to that room. So after the first phase, you have 4 rooms. After the second phase, you have 5 rooms. So once you do that 3, 2, 1 countdown timer, everybody's going to go to the middle area where Iryut is, and you're going to want to keep passing around the chalice. Any player that is still enlightened can actually do an expunge on Iryut, which does a lot of damage. Think of this kind of like the bomb mechanic in Golgoroth. It's the same thing, just does a big chunk of damage. And each damage phase, you should be able to get out 2 expunges, since you should be able to get 2 players enlightened. Just make sure to keep an eye on those timers. So often I see people die, including myself. I definitely was. Just make sure while you're doing damage, don't let that timer run out. So let's explain just a couple more things you should know about this fight. If you take too much time getting into the rooms and killing those wizards, Dark Liturgy will begin automatically. So make sure that everybody is paying attention to their chalice charges, and the scout should quickly be searching for those rooms weapons and calling them out. The Dark Liturgy song is also a wipe mechanic. If your team can't damage past that HP breakpoint by the time that timer reaches 0, your whole team is dead. One way you can completely avoid that though is to bring one divinity and have 5 players just obliterate her with the Legend of Acreus and maybe a heritage shotgun with reconstruction and focus fury. That's what I used. It did just chunks of damage. We killed her in 2 phases on contest mode with this strategy. It's very easy to do, but if you don't have those weapons, almost anything should work. She really doesn't have that much health. I haven't tested Thunderlord with Divinity yet, but I have full faith that this is going to work completely fine. And that's it for this fight. It's really quick and it's a lot of fun. So once you have killed Iryut, nice job. Let's go ahead and finalize this red border puzzle. Let's finish it. Very easy here. Just hop up to this top area. If the statue you're supposed to activate was on the right side, head this way, activate this one over here. If it was on the left, run around this way and activate this one. And you will know you have done all 3 correctly when it says a balance has been reached. To the victor go the spoils. All right, here we go. Time for Crota. This fight has a lot more to it than Destiny 1's Crota, thankfully, but it is still relatively easy to understand. We will be using a lot of the same mechanics that we've been doing so far, just on hard mode. Now we've got the presence of Crota debuff, which means that we can no longer just freely exchange the chalice anywhere we want like we have been doing the whole time. Now the only way to take the chalice is to have both players stand in this well of light area that will appear at random spots throughout this fight. Again, here's a map thanks to Priony. This is going to leave you a lot more open to enemy fire, to Crota, so it definitely adds that extra difficulty for sure. So the goal with this fight is to continue to get players enlightened, kill the sword bearers, and have these enlightened players grab those drop swords, swing them at Crota to lower this immunity shield. I'm sure that's plenty of information. A lot of you can probably just do the fight off of that information, but let's break it down just a little bit. You will start the fight by having everyone stand on a hive crystal in the middle of the room. Crota will then appear and the green doors will open on either side. Clear out whatever adds you want, but make sure one player beelines out that middle window to this middle area, grabs a chalice to get the enlightened chain going. 2 players should be in charge of the Boomer Knight towers on the left and right sides. Killing these boomers will spawn in the hive sword bearers from the bottom middle room, along with 2 ogres that will kind of spawn up out of the ground. These ogres should be top priority as they can laser you down very quickly. And just like the cross the bridge encounter, make sure to not instantly kill the swordbearer knight. Once that sword drops, it's going to despawn after about 12 seconds. And remember, you can only pick up the sword if you are enlightened. Communication is key here. Confirm with your team that someone is enlightened, and if someone says they are enlightened, you can collectively kill the swordbearer and have that enlightened player pick up the sword. The sword actually does surprising damage to a lot of adds, and the super recharges very quickly, but it's not going to be as good as not holding a sword, so it's best to get rid of it as quickly as you can. So my recommendation, what our team does, is to have the sword bearer immediately go up to Crota and start breaking down his shield. These swords normally have infinite ammo, but once you strike at Crota once, it's going to disappear in like 2 seconds. So it's best to have a pre-planned combo ready to go. My team likes using heavy, heavy, super heavy. I'm sure some better combos will come out over time, but that works completely fine. This method on contest mode took 3 swords, but on normal, it can be done with 2 swords. So you will need to have multiple sword bearers here. Just get ready to have a lot of people enlightened. If you want to, if you're dying a lot, maybe you're not really feeling comfortable with going up to Crota solo, you can have 2 to 3 sword bearers just kind of hold their swords and run around until the whole team is ready to do damage. You can have a warlock pop a well on Crota, then the sword bearers can just kind of swing at him. But again, I don't really like that method, since if you die with the sword, if you're just running around with the sword, you're kind of a sitting duck. And if you die with it, it's going to waste a lot of time. It's best to just go right at Crota, do as much shield damage as you can so you can get right back into the fight. As with each other encounter too, you cannot forget about the chalice. With how many things there are going on during this fight, it can be very easy to forget about. Thankfully, you have enough time to mess up the chalice a couple times, but if you take too long, just like Iryut, the Oversoul wipe mechanic will happen. So again, I know I sound like a broken record here, but just have a set order for chalice holders here, especially with how now you have to meet in that well of light to exchange the chalice, and make sure to obviously call out where your meter is at so the next player can easily meet you there and grab it in time. Recommendation, just call it at 3/4. That is the easiest call out. Hope that makes sense. All right, so you have juggled the chalice, you have done the sword damage, now it's time for real damage. Make sure that if you know you are going to break Crota's shield, Just let everyone know, hey, it's time for damage. You want everyone to be there the second Crota's shield is out. And before that player removes Crota's shield, whoever is holding the chalice should go down here to preserve the chalice. That way you're not having to worry about exchanging it during damage phase. There's a lot of different damage methods for Crota. We're just in the beginning, so the perfect meta hasn't been figured out yet. Some people like to use Legend of Acreus with fusion rifles. Others like the Lament Sword. I've seen some teams use rockets, even light attacking with adaptive frame swords like the Bequest can work. All of these options are good. The most important thing with damage though is to make sure someone is enlightened before going into damage phase. The Oversoul has to be destroyed before the timer hits 0 to avoid being wiped. Thankfully, this can easily be done with 1 to 2 fusion rifle shots. Just pay attention to that Oversoul timer. You don't want to wipe from that. It's really frustrating. We like to have one Enlightened player start shooting it at around 3 to 4 seconds left. And now it's just time to rinse and repeat. Nothing extra happens during this fight until you reach the final stand. Crota is going to rise up. He's going to do an AoE blast that can launch you back quite a bit. So it's best just to back up once you get him to final stand. Wait a few seconds and he'll be open for damage, so nuke him down. There is another Oversoul that spawns in during final, so you'll again want to make sure you have someone enlightened before heading into final stand. If that requires you to take an extra damage phase, do it. You're going to need that Oversoul. And that's it. Once you beat Crota, you should get that guaranteed red border chest to drop a weapon for you, along with another one that you can buy for 20 spoils of conquest. Good luck with the raid, guys. There are a lot of ifs, ands, and buts with this one. It was really hard to make this guide, showing you all the scenarios in which you might die, but it does make a lot of sense. Once you just complete it once, it's going to make sense for you. Just try everything out for yourself. I really hope this helped you out. And again, please join the Discord if you are looking to run it with a lot of cool players.